I've got a business trip this weekend, so I'm counting on you to take care of the house and mom, okay? What? Again? I can handle the weekdays, but not having you around on the weekends is tough. Do you realize how hard it is? Well, I have work, so what can I do? That's true, but then why don't you start working? If you do, I'll handle everything at home. Think you can earn as much as I do? That's impossible. Right? So, please, no complaints. I'm counting on you. That was a conversation with my husband before our problems began. Looking back, it's strange to think that he was always away on business trips, even on weekends. This is the story of my husband's selfish actions. We live with mother-in-law. It's been few years since we started living together. Mother-in-law has dementia. Her symptoms are still mild, but she needs special care. At first, it was just a bit of forgetfulness, but then her understanding and judgment deteriorated. She became irritable, and when we went to the doctor, she was diagnosed with dementia. Amidst this, father-in-law, who had been chronically ill, passed away. After that, mother-in-law lost even more spirit and started to shut herself in her room. After discussing what to do about mother-in-law with the family, we decided that my husband, as the eldest son, would take care of her. When I decided to marry him, I knew that this day would come. Before mother-in-law was diagnosed with dementia, she was very cheerful and lively. She had my husband when she was young, so she is quite younger than my parents. She was strict with my husband when he was a child, and he still is a bit scared of her, but she and I got along very well. She was always kind to me and was always on my side. I admired and loved her very much. Whenever my husband and I had an argument, I would report it to her, and she would scold my husband for me. It was quite funny to see my husband's troubled face. I believe we got along better than most mothers-in-law and daughters-in-law. However, as I mentioned earlier, since the death of father-in-law, she lost her spirit and stopped being strict with my husband. Or rather, she stopped talking much. Taking advantage of that, my husband's attitude gradually changed. It was as if he was taking revenge for the past, becoming more arrogant. In hindsight, the family discussion may have been my husband's strategy. Initially, sister-in-law and her husband, who lived near my in-laws, were supposed to take in mother-in-law, but my husband prevented it. I'm the eldest son, so I'll take care of her. My husband was very insistent. He was always getting scolded by his mother. They weren't particularly close, which made me wonder why. Maybe he did have a sense of duty as the eldest son. But for some reason, I didn't feel that was all there is to it. Perhaps it was intuition. And when we started living with her, the bad feeling I had became a reality. Taking advantage of Emil's quietness, he did and said whatever he wanted. He started to boldly speak his mind to her, even though he was so afraid of her before. Because of her dementia, it takes time for her to understand what's being said to her. Yet, my husband didn't hold back his complaints. And I was the one who would stop him. Then, an event occurred, hinting my husband's misdeeds. After a 3-day business trip, my husband returned home. As usual, I went to unpack his bag and found a pair of unfamiliar underwear. I always bought his underwear, so it was strange to see something I didn't recognize. It was men's underwear, so it definitely belonged to him, but it raised questions, so I decided to ask him about it. Hey, what happened to the underwear you took with you? Huh? What underwear? I've never seen this pair before. Did you buy it yourself? Yeah, I did. I had to buy some in a hurry over there. Why did you have to buy it? What happened to the ones you had? They got torn, so I threw them away. They were old, right? Torn? But I bought those recently. Oh, really? Maybe they just weren't good quality? Is that so? Watching his suspicious behavior, I felt uneasy, but I didn't press further. For a moment, a thought crossed my mind, but I decided not to worry about it. I was hoping nothing more would come of it. However, a few days later, another incident occurred. My husband returned from another business trip. I went to the door to welcome him. Welcome home. How was the trip? Yeah, it was fine. My husband was looking down, lacking his usual energy. What's wrong? Are you sick? I asked him. No, that's not it. I have something important to discuss. He replied, with a serious face. Mother-in-law had already gone to bed. I sat in the living room, ready to listen to what my husband had to say. And I was shocked by his words. I want a divorce. I was lost for words since it was so sudden. I'm sorry to shock you. But please, let's get a divorce. Why? What's the matter? To be honest, I've fallen in love with someone else. I've been having an affair. I'm sorry. That explained the unfamiliar underwear. It all made sense now. So you've been deceiving me all this time. You're the worst. I deserve that. There's more. It's hard to say, but she's pregnant. Pregnant? What? My voice involuntarily raised in shock. I didn't expect this to happen. I just found out about the pregnancy yesterday. She's 6 months pregnant. I still can't believe it. But we have no choice but to have the baby. I intend to be the father. That's why I'm asking for a divorce, please. Fine. I'll get divorced. After hearing that, there's no way we can continue as husband and wife. Thank you. I'm sorry. And you need to talk to mother-in-law yourself. With that, he fell silent. Why have you suddenly gone quiet? He awkwardly said. It's about my mother. Would you be able to take care of her? What? Do you realize what you're saying? I know it's selfish to ask. But my side chick can't handle taking care of my mother and her upcoming child. You understand that, right? How can you even ask for a divorce in this situation? Is it too much to ask? Of course. If you want a divorce, be prepared to take care of everything on your own. I understand. I'll figure something out. With that, he went to his room and closed the door. I didn't want to think about anything that day, so I just showered and went to bed. The next morning, something felt off. The room seemed too clean. Things were gone from the house. I had a bad feeling and rushed to my husband's room. He was already gone, and so were his belongings. I just sat there, feeling defeated. On the bed was a filled-out divorce form. And beside it, a note with just the words, "I'm sorry." And just like that, he left his mother, who needed care, behind. As I thought about what to do next, my hatred grew. I would never forgive him. I decided to seek revenge and started making plans. I immediately took action. I went to a detective agency to gather evidence of his infidelity. Since we haven't filed for a divorce yet, we were still legally married. He probably hadn't thought of that. I quickly found out where he was staying. The house of his mistress. The evidence of the affair quickly piled up. I had gathered enough proof in half the time I had requested from the private investigator. I decided to tell mother-in-law first. Although I wasn't sure she would understand, I explained it to her slowly and clearly. To my surprise, I saw a change in her facial expression. She responded with such clarity that I was convinced she was becoming her former self again. It turned out that the mistress worked at the same company as my husband, and mother-in-law suggested sending the evidence to his workplace. This will be our first act of revenge, she said with a smile. A few days later, my husband called, frantic. Yes, what is it? I responded calmly. Sending evidence of my affair to my workplace. Are you out of your mind? My husband was making a fuss over the phone. I never thought you'd do something like this. You're mistaken. It wasn't me who sent it. Then who did? It had to be you. Are you blaming it on me alone? Your abandoned mother is the one who did it. Don't think this is the end of it. I said what I had to say and hung up the phone. The phone kept ringing persistently after that, but I ignored it. Then mother-in-law came in. Time for our next move, she said and returned to her room, seemingly making a phone call. A few hours later, the doorbell rang. There was a woman standing in front of the door. I immediately recognized her, my husband's mistress. The face I had seen in photos. It seems that mother-in-law had called her over. I stayed in my room, leaving it to mother-in-law to handle the situation. Since my room was far from the living room, I couldn't hear anything, so I waited for the mistress to leave before asking mother-in-law about it. It seems the mistress was unaware of Emil's condition. If you're planning to marry my son, you'll have to take care of me. Are you okay with that? I think I'll be unable to use the bathroom on my own soon. Will you still marry him? Upon hearing this, the mistress was confused. Well, what's going to happen next? Mother-in-law seemed genuinely excited, almost making me wonder if her dementia had been cured by the thrill. And who would have predicted the outcome of her actions? The next day, the doorbell rang, and it was my husband at the door. What is it now? I was wrong. I want to talk. I decided to let him into the house to talk. Then, I heard an unexpected story from my husband. I broke up with her. The child isn't mine. It turned out that the mistress had multiple partners. She knew the child wasn't my husband's, but considered raising the child as his because of his status and financial stability. However, after speaking directly with mother-in-law, she realized she couldn't possibly be taking care of her. She got scared and confessed the truth to my husband. Upon reflection. Can we start over again? You don't need to answer right away. My answer is already clear. Leave this house immediately. We haven't filed for a divorce yet, because you missed signing one part in the paper. Since I have all the evidence of the affair, I will be seeking alimony. Please be prepared for that. I handed the divorce papers to my husband with a smile. Please, have mercy. Take responsibility for your actions, I said as I pushed him out of the house. Shortly after my husband left, mother-in-law came home from the hospital. Sister-in-law, who had accompanied her to the hospital, was there too, so I took the opportunity to report to her about what had happened. He got what he deserved. Sister-in-law said angrily. I really appreciate everything you've done, Mary. Taking care of me and dealing with my worthless son. I'm so sorry. I'll be moving in with my daughter now, so you go ahead and enjoy your life. Tears welled up in Emil's eyes as she said this. The next day, she moved in with sister-in-law. When I asked sister-in-law about Emil's condition, she said that while her dementia is somewhat managed with medication, it certainly wasn't cured. Eventually, my divorce finalized, and I received a fair amount of alimony. The mistress quit her job. Since mother-in-law sent the evidence of the affair to the company, it made her very uncomfortable to stay there. My husband submitted a transfer request to the company himself. It seems he got a demotion and a considerable amount of reduction in income. As for me, caring for mother-in-law has inspired me to help others in similar situations. I am currently studying to go into nursing. I'm grateful for mother-in-law because she led me to this dream. I truly hope for the progression of her dementia to slow down so that she can live longer. I had no idea my spouse had a stepson that big. I feel deceived. According to my husband, he didn't tell me simply because I didn't ask if he had a stepchild. Furthermore, he and my mother-in-law have been treating me and that child horribly. Just remember, the grudge of the two of us, I will return it 100-fold. My name is Rachel, 42 years old, and I married George, who is a divorcee and 4 years older. Having lost my mother early, I missed marriage opportunities while caring for my father, and a year after his death, a relative introduced me to George. George, looking sincere and good in a suit, confidently led our relationship, and we married 6 months after meeting. His mother was pleased that someone would marry her divorced son, reassured me that there'd be no issues between us. Since George was divorced, we skipped the wedding and reception. We filled our marriage paper at the city hall and had a simple dinner with relatives. When we were back at his family's home, I found teen sneakers. Are these yours? No, they're Charles's. Charles? Who's that? That was when I first learned that George had a son called Charles who was a high school student. He was a child by his ex-wife and she had passed away due to illness when he was 10. His grandparents wanted him, but mother-in-law insisted he stays as George's heir, and he has been living at this house ever since. I wasn't told any of this. Suddenly having a 16-year-old stepson for my first marriage was daunting. But George said, "You didn't ask, Rachel, did you?" Indeed, it wouldn't be strange for a divorcee to have kids. If it's my fault for not asking, perhaps that's true, but shouldn't such things be shared? On the first day of marriage, I already felt distrust towards George. Mother-in-law added, "Don't worry. We'll send Charles away after high school." Does that mean I have to deal with this for more than a year and a half? I was really shocked, but I also felt uneasy about her saying she'd kick him out. To use such words about her grandson, isn't that quite cold? Or is he really such a terrible son? This trouble on day one made me anxious, but I resolved to try. In the end, Charles, who didn't show up for the wedding day meal, emerged from his room the next morning for breakfast. He had the look of a teenager in full rebellion. Not even glancing my way. Hi, I'm Rachel. I'm starting to live in this house from today," I said nervously. He just muttered annoying and went back to his room with his slice of toast. I guess this is what they call the rebellious phase, I thought, trying to convince myself that all teenage boys must be like this. But then George and mother-in-law said, "Rachel, you don't need to bother greeting someone like him. Yeah, despite us making sure he goes to school, he's just become more and more of a problem. If he's going to turn out like that, we should never have taken him in." Hearing them speak like that brought back the unease I felt the night before. They say children all grow up the way they are raised, don't they? A child's personality doesn't just get better by going to school. Maybe Charles turned out this way because of you too? As I pondered this, mother-in-law spoke to me. "Rachel, don't worry about Charles. Could you massage my shoulders and back later?" Yes, of course. As getting older, everything starts to hurt. I'll need you to do this every day from now on. Every day? I thought, and George added nonchalantly. That's great, Mom. Rachel took care of her dad for a long time, so feel free to ask her for help. Really, it saves money, and that's a big help. Their words made it clear to me. George married me to be a caretaker for his mother. I remember how their faces lit up during the first meeting when they heard I'd been caring for my father for nearly 10 years. As I recalled this, my displeasure must have shown because George glanced at me and said, "What's wrong? A woman over 40 getting married should be grateful." I didn't want to hear that from a divorced man over 45. Although I didn't talk back, I was already regretting this marriage. Afterward, George and mother-in-law's true colors became increasingly apparent. George, spoiled by his mother, wouldn't even take his socks out of the dresser himself. It was always Rachel. "Bring them quickly." Really, what a pain. My ex-wife was at least better than this. And he was very cold to Charles. Just seeing him eating in the dining room would prompt George to flip his plate over, saying, "You're in the way, go to your room," or yell at him after seeing his report card, "Aren't you ashamed of these grades? Quit high school and get out of this house." It was emotional and verbal abuse at its worst. Moreover, it seems that when Charles was younger, he even physically hurt him. It had become neighborhood gossip, so thankfully, it seems he hasn't done that recently. Mother-in-law, for her part, would have me massage her multiple times a day because of various pains, and on top of that, she would have me run errands non-stop. She even had the gall to say, "Your father must have pitted having such a failure of a daughter to take care of him." I wanted to leave right then and there, but I couldn't bring myself to do it because of Charles. Living with him, I realized he wasn't a bad kid at heart. Whenever he had laundry, he always made sure to say, "Auntie, here," and after meals, he took his dishes all the way to the sink. At least he was better than George and mother-in-law, who would just leave everything wherever they last used it. Once, I saw him with a girl who looked to be his girlfriend. Charles had all the buttons of his clothes undone, and underneath was a worn-out t-shirt, looking very much like a delinquent. But the girl was properly dressed in her clothes, not too short skirt, a very pretty and neat-looking girl. And when Charles noticed me, he said something to her, and she smiled and nodded to me. Charles, it seemed, didn't hate me, and choosing such a polite girl suggested he was at heart very earnest and kind. It made me very happy. All right, I thought, I'll protect this boy from George and mother-in-law until he gets married. I made up my mind to support him. From then on, I kept healthy distance with Charles, slowly becoming friendlier. I made his favorite meals and gave him nice sneakers for his birthday. Once, when he was down about bad test scores, I confessed my own worst grades from when I was a student. "You're just as dumb as me," he'd laugh, and it made me so happy. However, as I grew closer to Charles, George and mother-in-law's behavior toward me worsened. "When thinking about you, Rachel, you're over 40, right? That means you can't have George's children. We'll need you for caregiving, but maybe George needs another woman, huh? I recently met this young and pretty bar girl. When I told her I was married, she was shocked, so maybe I'll have her bear my child." That they could say such things to me, even half-jokingly, shows they really only see me as a housekeeper or a caregiver. Well, that's fine, it's actually more convenient for me. Yes, I'm terribly sorry for being such an incompetent wife, unable to bear cute grandchildren that resemble George, I said meekly, apologizing. For years later, Charles turned 20 and was set to marry that young lady from back then. Hearing they didn't have much money as both were high school graduates, I gave my savings of $10,000 from my single years. I also rented out the restaurant where she worked and invited many guests, mainly former classmates, for a lively wedding reception. I prepared a surprise gift for Charles, which he was delighted with. Of course, George and mother-in-law were not invited. Good, my role is over. I thought to myself as I headed home, only to be called into the living room by my husband, where mother-in-law was smirking. George handed me the divorce paper that was on the table, saying, "Thanks for the hard work, housekeeper. Now that Charles is gone, you're no longer needed, so let's get divorced." Wait, what about taking care of mother-in-law? I was surprised as I had planned to bring up divorce myself. Actually, I picked up the divorce paper today from the city hall. Did you know? You can't ask for a divorce if you're the one at fault. George and mother-in-law looked shocked. Not having considered that I wanted a divorce, especially that they could be responsible. George turned red and yelled, "You have no right to ask for a divorce. You can't have children, you can't even take care of my mother properly, it's all your fault." Mother-in-law agreed. "Exactly. We took you in even though you were past your prime, and ever since you came, my health has gone downhill. Mother, all you do is give orders and lie in bed all day. I think that's why your health has deteriorated." I retorted, and she fell silent. "I've endured the last 4 years, putting up with trash like you too. I'll tell you why I've been so patient." "Trash? How dare you?" I told them that I had tolerated everything until now just to help Charles, who had been ignored and treated harshly in this house. Now that Charles got married today, there's no reason for me to stay married, so I asked for a divorce. George snorted in derision. "You're an idiot. Even if you got on Charles's good side, you won't get a dime of assets from us. You should have been more devoted to us instead of him." I laughed back at him. "What assets? There's hardly any left. Your father gambled it all away, I heard from the neighbors. Debt collectors came by many times." George was surprised I knew, but retorted, "We still have this house. If you stayed married to me, you could have lived here for life." I've seen termites flying around the house lately. I heard if you see one, there are 30,000 hidden. This house is in a pretty bad state. I don't want such house. They were silent, so I went on the offensive. "Let me say this, Mother, you've been talking about how your health is getting worse, haven't you? I don't want to take care of an old woman like you. In 10 years, George will be retired. You expect me to take care of him for the rest of his life? That's a joke. Besides, I heard his company's performance is terrible. If it keeps up, there won't be much retirement money, right? Living with you sounds like a very poor old age." George, thinking he had a trump card, blurted out, "Anyway, we're getting divorced. And I'm going to make sure I get my share of the property." "Huh? I know you inherited several $100,000 from your father's estate. And there was life insurance money too. I'm going to use that to put my mother in a fancy nursing home." Mother-in-law nodded in satisfaction at her side. "Oh, that's why they said I was no longer needed even though mother-in-law's care was still an issue." I couldn't help but laugh. You know, property division is about splitting the assets that the couple built together. George and mother-in-law seemed confused, so I explained further. That means, neither my father's inheritance nor the life insurance payout are included since they weren't built together by us as a couple. Sorry to burst your bubble. Hearing this, they looked bewildered, finally realizing they were in a weaker position. Rachel, don't you think we need to talk more about this? Mother-in-law suggested timidly, with George nodding vigorously beside her. No, thank you. I'll go ahead with the divorce. I thrust the divorce paper I had obtained at George. I have plenty of recordings of the abusive things you two have said to me and Charles. If we go to court, you'll definitely lose. After I said that, George, looking like he had swallowed a bitter bug, reluctantly signed the divorce paper. As for the divorce settlement and property division, I've got a lawyer, so from now on, you can deal with him, I added. I handed them the lawyer's business card, and they seemed to resign themselves to the situation. That's it, right? Not so fast, there's more. In fact, Charles's deceased mother's parents are also planning to sue you for damages. What? When there was a Charles's wedding, I had hired a private investigator to find his maternal grandparents and invited them as a surprise. According to Charles's grandparents, after his mother passed away, George and he moved to George's parents' home. They weren't informed of the new address, so they lost contact with Charles. When Charles and his grandparents, who hadn't seen each other for 10 years, met, they hugged and cried together. After hearing about the mistreatment and verbal abuse toward Charles from George and mother-in-law, his grandparents decided to hire a competent lawyer to pursue the case thoroughly. George and mother-in-law were shocked by this revelation. I delivered the final blow to them. Mother, please find George a young, healthy woman who can bear children. But, do you really think any woman would want to marry a twice-divorced, over 50-year-old man with no real assets and a hint of old age? After I left, I heard that they became quite troubled. Mother-in-law became immobile due to a lack of exercise, and without the possibility of a fancy nursing home, she had to hire a helper reluctantly. With the payments for my settlement, George was drowning in debt. Moreover, the house had become a dirty home, shunned by neighbors due to the termites. Despite all this, George proposed to that bar girl he'd been seeing for 4 years, which is quite something. Of course, she turned him down immediately. Afterward, I moved back to my family home for a while to relax. Later, by the recommendation of Charles and his wife, I rented a place near their apartment. They actually offered for me to live with them, but I couldn't impose on my stepson and his new bride. Now, I work part-time at a nearby supermarket, looking forward to meeting their child expected next year. My name is Sarah, and I'm 21 years old. I guess you could say I'm a writer by profession. I have an older brother. His name is Dave, and he's 30 years old. He graduated from college and works for a major company. Our parents died in a car accident when I was in junior high, which caused me to become depressed and withdraw from the world. As a result, I couldn't attend high school. But with medical treatment and my brother's support, I'm doing better now. When our parents passed away, my brother had just started his job. Despite the difficulty, he took good care of me and handled all the household matters. I began to help out by cleaning and cooking, gradually getting back to a normal life. Now, we live together in the house our parents left us. Since I work from home, I handle most of the meal preparation and shopping. Going out for groceries and such is a nice change of pace for me. I find joy in cooking, coming up with menus, and following recipes to the letter. So, I'm pretty good at cooking. Back when I was shut in, Dave bought me a laptop. He said, "Check out the world you don't know yet." And so, I started exploring all sorts of worlds on the internet. I began wanting to visit the places I saw in online photos and videos, places I came across on video sharing and message board sites, and Dave would take me, or I'd start going on my own. Without Dave's support, I might still be shut in. Eventually, I discovered the concept of working from home. Bit by bit, I was able to start working, which led to more opportunities to go out, and I managed to get back to a normal life. After our parents passed away, Dave became like a parent to me. He has this perfect balance of kindness and strictness. He was always serious about his studies, which is why he could get a job at a major company after graduating from a national university. Now, 7 years have gone by, and he's been promoted to a senior position. There's been a change in Dave. He was always shy around women, but after seeing all his friends get married, he finally started dating someone he met through a friend. 2 years on, she proposed, and they decided to get married. One day, he said there was someone he wanted me to meet and invited me to dinner. It was at this traditional American-style restaurant. A bit shyly, Dave introduced me to the woman who'd become my sister-in-law. And graduated from the same university as Dave and is 2 years his junior. She works at a major food company. Her wavy, shoulder-length hair makes her look more mature. Nice to meet you, I'm his sister, Sarah. Please take good care of my brother. Pleasure to meet you. I'm Anne. You're such a cute sister. I've always wanted a sister, so I'm really happy you're going to be my sister-in-law. She had quite strong makeup on, but she had the air of a lovely woman. And then, she started asking me about myself. Dave graduated from a good university, so Sarah, you must have gone to a decent college too, right? My brother answered on my behalf. Actually, Sarah didn't go to college. When our parents died in an accident, she was in her 3rd year of middle school and she took ill mentally. It took her a while to recover. Of course, she's leading a normal life now. What? Sick in your 3rd year of middle school? So you didn't go to high school either? Anne seemed very surprised and pressed on. I felt I had to add to my brother's explanation since it was about me. Yes, that's right. I caused a lot of trouble for my brother because of my illness. But thanks to him, I was able to get back on my feet. I can't thank him enough. I see, that's interesting. And my brother may look a little older than his age because of all he's been through, but he's got a great personality. Please make sure you look beyond his appearance. What are you saying, you rascal? I tried to lighten the mood with a joke since the conversation had gotten a bit heavy, but Anne didn't laugh. However, at that moment, I thought her attitude was due to being moved by what my brother had done for me. From what my brother told me, Anne's parents both graduated from prestigious universities, and it seems her entire family did as well. Naturally, they all graduated with excellent grades, and many found employment in well-known companies. There are many professionals like doctors and lawyers in her family. They are quite the accomplished bunch. Anne's father serves as an executive at a major publishing house, and her mother is the president of the local women's association. Hearing this, I thought my brother was marrying into an amazing family. Despite his busy work schedule, Dave was steadily making wedding preparations. Seeing him so happy, I helped out with whatever I could. Then one day, I got a call on my phone. I was a bit nervous to answer a call from an unknown number, but I saw it was properly identified and picked up. May I ask who's calling? Sarah. This is Jessica, Anne's mother. To my surprise, the caller was Jessica, Anne's mother, who would be my mother-in-law. What can I do for you? As I asked with a pounding heart, she said, I heard from Anne the other day, you haven't been to high school and your highest education is middle school, is that correct? I wasn't sure what she was getting at, but I answered honestly. Yes, I was mentally unwell after our parents' accident, and it took a long time to fully recover, so I didn't go to high school. I sympathize with you. But it's a fact that you're a middle school graduate, right? Yes. Well, I have a favor to ask. Could you, perhaps, not attend Dave and Anne's wedding? Actually, please don't attend. What do you mean by that? She had caught me off guard with such an outrageous request. Dave and Anne both graduated from top universities, and my husband and I did too. Of course, all our relatives are college grads. Yes, and you really are slow, aren't you? Just like a middle school grad. Sigh, with a sigh, Jessica continued speaking. As I mentioned earlier, our family is full of elites. College graduates are a given, working as executives in major corporations, doctors, lawyers, we have people of significant status. Such distinguished people will be attending the wedding. I was beginning to understand what she was implying. So, I don't want you, a middle school graduate, attending this kind of event. In fact, I want you to stay away. But I am Dave's sister and his only family. I can't just not attend. Even so, please don't come. How can we introduce you, a middle school grad, to our relatives without feeling ashamed? Do you understand? I've conveyed our wishes anyway. How utterly rude. After hanging up, I was trembling with anger. Their parents dislike me, a middle school graduate, because they are too obsessed with appearances and social standing. At least, I've never been ashamed of my life and I don't think I'm worthy of ridicule by others. But, could my presence make my brother unhappy? If I step back, my brother could have a happy marriage and a future. I've always caused him so much trouble, I want him to be happy more than anything. I can't be the one to ruin that. But I can't accept being denied for who I am. My head's all over the place. I talked to my brother about this. He told me, don't worry, you're my sister, my only family. Attend my wedding with confidence. I'll protect you no matter what happens. But, if my presence causes you trouble, I won't mind not attending. There's no way that would trouble me. You're my only sister. It'd be shameful for a brother not to protect his sister, right? Dave, thank you. His words gave me strength, and I decided to attend the wedding. On the day, when our family's representative, my uncle, introduced me, Anne's parents looked at me with displeasure. My brother seemed to notice their attitude as well. At the reception, the family seating was at the very back, facing the head table. I thought maybe they hadn't prepared a seat for me, but there it was. Sitting down, I could feel the sharp glances. Indeed, Jessica, my mother-in-law, was staring right at me. She came over and said, "Why are you here? Didn't I tell you not to come because you would bring shame to our family? I am his biological sister. I have every right to be here." I responded firmly, and she retorted, "Such cheek from a middle school grad, you'll remember this." Leaving those nasty words behind, she walked away. Then the bride and groom made their entrance. I couldn't help but smile at Dave, looking different from usual. Anne was also glittering and dressed beautifully. As soon as the go-between finished, Jessica stood up and spoke with the MC. Grabbing the mic, she started with a loud voice. "All of our family members have graduated from college and have reputable jobs. We see Dave as fitting for our family, but there's one issue." She paused, then continued. "It's his sister, a middle school graduate. She is an embarrassment to our family. We implore the groom to disown her. If that's not possible, the marriage cannot go forward." The room stirred, but Jessica turned to Dave, asking, "Can you promise right here to disown this shameful middle school grad sister and join our excellent family?" Anne and her father nodded as if it was expected. She then handed the mic to Dave with a victorious expression. He took a deep breath and answered, "Yes, my sister didn't finish high school. But she's my family. I can't disown my sister. To all present, I apologize, but I must call off this wedding and sever ties with this family. That's my decision." After declaring that, Dave slammed the microphone down on the table as if to make a statement and walked straight over to me. With a refreshed smile, as if a weight had been lifted, he spoke to me. "Sarah, I'm sorry for dragging you into this. We don't need to stay at such a place. Let's go home." I later heard from the relatives who were present that the wedding reception was cancelled after the groom, my brother, walked out. Anne started crying, her parents were blamed by the other relatives, and they ended up apologizing profusely. They even had to return the wedding gifts they had received. Sometime later, my brother received a call from our uncle. He said that while Dave's actions at the reception weren't commendable, had things continued, he would have ended up disowning Dave. Anne's family agreed to bear all the costs of the ceremony and offered a significant amount as compensation, but my brother declined. He said he would rather have a sincere apology to his sister than settle for money. After a while, a meeting was arranged at our home to discuss the aftermath. I had resolved to show Anne's parents just how mistaken they were about me. And her parents and I had a discussion. They brought a gift and some money as an apology for the inconvenience, apologizing for their behavior at the reception. However, the apology didn't seem heartfelt, it was more like they were just going through the motions. Jessica, the former mother-in-law, made it clear that she had no regrets, saying, "We should have done a thorough background check. That would have prevented this mess." Her husband, Ethan, also added, "Dave should have explained everything about his sister to us from the start. That way, none of this would have happened." Furious, I proceeded with the plan I had prepared. "Ethan, you work at Rainbow Publishing, correct?" He looked at me disdainfully and replied, "Yes, that's right. I'm a director there." "What about it?" "I've been working with Rainbow Publishing. However, I've decided I don't want to continue my contract with a company associated with you." "Is that all?" "It doesn't bother me. There are plenty of other writers. It won't affect us at all." "Understood. I'll terminate my contract immediately. And I'll be going into contract with your rival company." "Go ahead, be my guest," he said with bravado. Ignoring his confidence, I called my editor at Rainbow Publishing and informed them of the contract termination. They were flustered on the other end of the line, but I stated my piece and hung up. Then I contacted the rival company to proceed with a new contract. Even after the call, Ethan sat there, smug, while my brother looked around, confused by the situation. Eventually, Ethan's phone rang. "Hello?" "Yes, it's me." "What? The CEO is on the line?" "What do you mean?" His face turned pale as he whispered into the phone. After he hung up, he turned to me and asked in a much humbler tone, You're the popular author Ms. Rowling, aren't you?" "Well, yes. Ms. Rowling is my pen name for light novels." "Why do you ask?" "My CEO just told me that our star author is canceling the contract because of me. He says it's my responsibility. I might be demoted over this." "Didn't you just say it was okay?" "That's all there is to it." I spoke calmly. "Aren't you the elite? Why would you be embarrassed by someone like me, a mere middle school graduate? I beg you, please reconsider the cancellation." "I apologize, I'm really sorry," he pleaded, his attitude having completely changed. Seeing her father's sudden shift, and asked incredulously, "Why are you groveling to a simple middle school grad like her? She's the flagship author of our publishing house. If she leaves, the damage to our company is immeasurable." The CEO said I have to take responsibility. I could be demoted over this. "Really? You? If that happens, we'll be too ashamed to face our relatives. Please, do something." The former in-laws were in disarray, arguing amongst themselves. "Please, reconsider, won't you?" "No. The discussion is over. Please leave." My brother supported my decision and asked, "Then, if that's settled, would you mind leaving?" My brother and I watched with smiles as the three of them left our home with their shoulders slumped. After the three of them left, my brother Dave looked surprised and said, "So you're a popular author?" I had no idea. "Well, I've been using a pen name. I posted a story online last year and it got really popular. Rainbow Publishing approached me for a contract. I've been making a good amount of money from it." I explained with a sense of pride. His smile burst forth. It felt like the first time in a long time I'd seen him smile like that. And with that, the broken engagement was completely behind us. And seems to be looking for a new partner, but after the incident became widely known, no one wants anything to do with her. She's become a recluse at home and has even quit her job. Ethan was blamed for the contract cancellation with me and was demoted to an ordinary employee. Unable to bear the warehouse work, he resigned. Jessica faced harsh criticism from the relatives for her actions at the reception and is no longer considered reputable in her so-called elite family. I feel like it serves them right. The publishing house I transferred to has been very supportive, and they've even turned my popular works into comics. Now there's talk of an anime adaptation. As for Dave, he's buried the memory of the wedding as a dark part of his history and is now focusing on his work. I'm looking forward to the day a wonderful person comes into his life. We're finally back to peaceful days. I'm still busy creating light novels, but I've come to realize that this kind of daily routine is happiness in itself. I'm planning to go on a trip with my brother again, taking along our departed parents' portraits. Sarah, did you get engaged? Congratulations. Thanks. We haven't decided on the wedding details yet, but will you come? Of course. I was happy that you attended mine, so I'd love to be there for yours this time. I was thrilled when my best friend was so happy about my engagement. I've always dreamed of a wedding and never thought such a thing could happen. My name is Sarah. I'm a 27-year-old office worker, engaged to my boyfriend, Tom. He proposed just the other day. On our 3rd anniversary, during dinner, he surprised me with a proposal. Since I always thought he was the one I'd marry, and we had started discussing it, so I said yes, without any hesitation. How about we go check out some wedding venues soon? A while after the proposal, Tom suggested this to me. I've always been fascinated by weddings. My best friend had the beautiful wedding last year, making me determined to have one too. Although many opt out of weddings these days, everyone around me had one, and I've always wanted to wear a wedding dress once. Tom knew this, so he brought it up. However, I don't want a lavish ceremony. I don't want to rely on parental support, preferring a wedding within our budget. After sharing these thoughts with Tom, he agreed, and we narrowed down our options based on budget and location. On our next day off, we went venue hunting and I instantly fell in love with one chapel and reception hall. It looked affordable, and with Tom's agreement, we decided on that hotel venue. After telling our parents over the phone, they said it's our decision and seemed supportive. But then, the problem arose. The next day, while at Tom's place, his phone rang. It's from Dad. As he answered, I could hear the sound of shouting from the other end. How dare you decide on such a venue without consulting us? I've visited his family home a few times. His father seems to care a lot about appearances. I knew this, but I never expected such an outburst over our wedding plans. Tom's voice was getting increasingly irritated on the phone. It's our wedding, for crying out loud. We're paying for it ourselves, you don't have a say in this. Tom was saying this, but his father didn't seem to be listening and was still shouting. All right, I'll come over next week, and we can talk then. Tom said with a sigh, sounding annoyed, but the shouting was still audible on the phone. Both of you should come. Got it? Tom seemed surprised, apparently planning to go alone. But I heard it too and nodded affirmatively at him. He looked apologetic as he hung up the phone. Okay, next week then. After hanging up, he turned to me, almost as if he was about to kneel in apology. I'm so sorry. Really sorry. Dad's always like this, wanting everything his way. He's showy, probably wants a bigger wedding. But I swear, I'll convince him. I won't let this trouble you, Sarah. It's okay, I'll help convince him too. After all, I was the one who insisted on this venue. That's not true. I liked it too. The food was great. Let's definitely have our ceremony there. Tom promised me with determination. The following week, I went with Tom to his parents' house. Mother-in-law greeted us as we arrived. Sarah, thanks so much for coming, sorry for the trouble. She is kind, always nice to me. To me, they seemed like a couple from an old TV show, a stubborn husband and a supportive wife. I can talk to mother-in-law, but honestly, I'm not comfortable around father-in-law. But since Tom said he would handle it, and we needed to talk, I sat down with a bit of courage in front of his dad. Skipping the pleasantries, we got right to the point. We've decided to have our wedding here. Look at this, please. We visited the venue, and it was really nice. We even had a tasting for the reception food, and every dish was delicious. I think you'll like it. Tom said, pulling out the venue's brochure and presenting it to his dad like he was a salesperson. Oh, isn't that a lovely place? Mother-in-law said, looking at the brochure, but father-in-law remained silent with a scowl on his face. After Tom finished his pitch, his father sighed. This place won't do. He talked about how other relatives had bigger weddings and how having a smaller one would be embarrassing, clearly wanting to show off. Then, he turned to mother-in-law and said, Hey, bring that over here. Upon being asked, she returned with the brochure. She had a somewhat downcast look on her face. He took it and showed it to us. This place would be great. It's the most famous venue around here, really adds prestige," he said, apparently not noticing our shocked expressions. "My acquaintance works here, and they've already reserved the reception hall and plan for us," he continued. Tom immediately objected. "Hold on, what do you mean a setup? We don't want to have our wedding here. It has to be a place like this. Here's the venue and the plan," he insisted, showing us a brochure of a very formal venue, completely different from what we envisioned. It was so large, we wondered how many guests we'd need to fill it. We didn't plan to invite more than 50 people, but this venue would require double that number. Moreover, the plan he brought up included an outdated gondola show. "A gondola, really? That's not what we want." About this plan, father." "Oh, this?" Gondolas and smoke were the symbols of weddings in our time. They're essential. In stark contrast to him, who was brimming with confidence, Tom and I were completely disheartened. We exchanged glances, both just sighing in frustration. "Anyway, it's our wedding. We'll decide on the venue and the plan. Plus, a place this big will cost way more," Tom argued. "Don't worry about the cost. I've asked my acquaintance, so it's cheaper. You should be grateful for my connections," father-in-law said proudly. However, the nature of this distant contact was unclear. Relying on such a weak connection for a discount probably wouldn't make much difference in the end. It might be cheaper, but it's still more than double what we planned. We're not inviting that many guests. It's not feasible, Tom stated. This seemed to strike a nerve with his dad. How many guests are you planning to invite? Can't you even fill a venue like this? He exclaimed. When he heard the number of our guests, he became even angrier. Such a small number would barely cover the relatives. No way, we don't have that many relatives, Tom said with an exasperated look. But it seemed like father-in-law was planning to invite nearly strangers in the name of relatives. Forget it, this discussion is pointless. This is one thing I won't budge on. No matter what you say, if you're going to keep this up, Dad, you don't have to come to the wedding. When Tom said that, even his dad finally quieted down. Mother-in-law, who had been silent until then, also joined in to support us. Honey, let the kids do what they want. Times have changed since our days, she said. Finally, his dad backed down. After that, our wedding preparations went smoothly. Choosing the wedding dress and planning the event was fun. We almost finished the guest list, settling on around 40 people. We decided on just one outfit change. It might seem minimal, but we found a dress we loved, and that was enough. We allocated the extra budget to the food. With most of the details set, we went to report to Tom's parents. Tom, fearing his dad might object again, said I didn't have to go, but I thought it's better to inform them in advance to avoid further issues. As expected, father-in-law had only complaints. Just one outfit change. I expected at least 3. And the guest list needs to be doubled. We can increase it just with our relatives. Before we could object, he proudly announced. By the way, Ethan will be coming. Ethan? Tom and I were puzzled. You know, the city councilman, Ethan. What? Why? It's an honor. I asked him through my connections. Wait a minute, we don't have any connection to someone like that. The conversation between Tom and his father continued, but suddenly turned to me. So, Sarah, who are you inviting? Surely, you'll invite at least one councilman, right? A councilman. That's a bit. Father-in-law visibly became irate. What do you mean? A bride who can't even invite a councilman to the reception is out of the question. I had almost lost my patience multiple times, wanting to remind him that our wedding wasn't a stage for his vanity. But his last comment pushed me over the edge. All right, I'll invite someone of a different status then. Tom also seemed to have had enough, and without saying anything more, we left the house. 3 months later, on our long-awaited wedding day. While I was waiting in the dressing room, I heard a commotion coming from the groom's dressing room. But, having expected this, I decided to ignore it. The ceremony went on without any issues and was over in no time. Father-in-law looked disgruntled, but it was a situation of his own making. The next day, as Tom and I were spending time in our new home, his father, predictably, came over. When his mother accompanied him into the room, he instantly became furious, like a kettle boiling over. What was with the guest list yesterday? I couldn't help but smile inwardly at the predictable scene. You're the one who said to invite a councilman, Tom retorted, and his dad started to falter. I had no idea a former minister would come. That's why I told you, I would invite someone of a different status. You're not supposed to show up the groom. Because of you, my reputation for inviting the city councilman has been tarnished. I shook my head when Tom tried to intercede. Then you shouldn't have said such things in the first place. It's not my fault if your reputation suffers. I didn't have any other acquaintances to invite. Once I started, I couldn't stop. You thought I couldn't invite someone more important than the people you invited, right? Were you planning to say I wasn't a suitable bride? I didn't mean it like that. He visibly shrank. Then what did you mean? Let me guess, you just wanted to show off at your son's wedding that you know a councilman, right? He had nothing to say in response, just glaring at me. That man is my best friend's father, and we've been close for years. He was happy when he heard about our marriage, but said he didn't want to bother and declined to attend. But when I told him what you said, he happily agreed to come. Father-in-law was left speechless. Tom came to my support. Dad, you always show off too much. Think about the trouble it causes us. Using your own son's wedding as a tool for your vanity is just too much. Then, suddenly, mother-in-law, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. Now that Tom's wedding is over, I want a divorce. What are you saying? Not just his father, but everyone present was shocked. I've been patient until now, but I've reached my limit. Yesterday's wedding was wonderful. During my own wedding, everything was decided by you and your parents. I couldn't even wear the dress I wanted. I still remember it. I'm glad Tom and Sarah could have a wedding without regrets. Hearing this story for the first time, I couldn't hide my surprise. Anyway, we're going home now. Mother-in-law, who always supported her husband, had changed and took him back home with her. Afterward, father-in-law was indeed divorced, and he, having never lived alone or managed household chores, was struggling even with tasks like taking out the trash. The man who had always put on airs, now known to be divorced, was pitied by those around him. Tom's mother, having gathered evidence of long-term emotional abuse, received alimony and became much brighter in her demeanor. Life with Tom as newlyweds was going well, and I was very happy. It was just a coincidence that my best friend's father was a former minister, but it helped us break away from the vain father-in-law.